or the person whom I'm going to be talking about today, architect Manish Gulati. Firstly, I would like to say that he has been a very, very informal person to me. I've always been able to approach sir with a lot of ease. And formally giving an introduction, he's been working for more than 15 years. His experience is from designing accessories, products, exhibitions, retail, residences, to national institutional projects, sports stadiums, hospitality, and much more. His past and current assignments include NIFT Kangra campus, HP, DPCC headquarters in New Delhi, NIWS campus in Goa, ITM campus Gwalior, and Sports Academy for Directorate of Sports and Youth Welfare, Hospitality and retail projects, and many, many more that drives his passion. And to talk about the studio and the practice from the beginning reflected his clear approach to design, contemporary, bold, and global, with subtle regional and contextual interventions to his concepts. His innate ability to remain abreast with technology, his deep love for the arts and sensitivity towards life always remains at the core of any of his work. His design process is supported by his international and holistic approach towards architecture in terms of constant research, resolution, case studies, and project discussions on design, functionality, technology, inventive concepts, and sustainable issues. This is a small brief about Manish Gulati. I'm really happy to have you with us today here, sir. And
thank you, Reeveezee.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
So
am I audible?
The audio is clear. The audio is clear. Yeah. So, and to give a small brief about Manish sir and MOFA Studios, is like I've approached him. I think during the pandemic, I called him once and I said, "Sir, I really am looking for some ways to brainstorm with the students, and I want you to just come on a lecture or speak for students." And he was very open about it. So I really wanted some MOFA Studios to be present in this panel, and he said that he does not want to speak in the beginning. He wanted to go through it and speak somewhere in the end during this entire conversation. And I am happy that we've got very, very simple but very interesting questions towards MOFA Studios for the day. So I'm going to directly jump on into the questions because we have 1 hour. And first, I'm going to ask a question, which is something that came so many times in different ways. So your approach to design sets you apart from most of the firms in the country. Do you think you're out of the ordinary? And this starts from the way you have thought about your website, to the way you project your projects, to the way you actually also displayed your works on Instagram. So do you think you are out of the ordinary at this moment in our country as an architectural firm?
I don't know how to even answer a question like that. People tell me that it's out of the ordinary. I think we as a studio just do what we like to do and what we feel is right and what comes naturally to us. It becomes different from compared to what's happening in the rest of the country. Yes, it's not intended. It is something that is a very honest approach to how we think and how we like to work. Our studio is almost like a lab. I a lot of times don't even know what's happening in the rest of the country. So I mean, it would be rude to say that yes, I'm not aware of what's going on in architectural field and things, and it would make me feel very ignorant about the contemporary architectural scenario within the country. But we've always kept a focus in terms of how we want to do things and not follow any kind of trends or what's going on in the contemporary scene of architecture. Yes, I think we want to just do what the project brief says. Every time we get a project, we think about it, we brainstorm extensively within the studio, and that brainstorming never ends. And it just turns out to be as honest and natural as what the project demands. So yeah, I guess that's what the whole approach has been.
But again, talking about your projects, which is very, very, technology driven, which is actually something we're going to be talking in the next question itself. Mm-hmm. But is it something that you're saying that it is not intentional, honestly, that you don't want to be out of the ordinary, but the current scenario, many people have asked, why are you trying to be different? Or is it a pressure? Or how do you think about it? So do you think this is a product of some kind of thought that you really want, or that you've set up, that your mindset? Or why do you think such a system was created? Why do you call yourself a lab? Why is not a normal architect's office? What influences you? Probably that's the right way to ask. What influences you to be a studio like you are?
Okay, I think the whole approach starts with how I began the practice. And I didn't start off as an architect. I started off, so I come from CEPT Ahmedabad, and CEPT, as people know, is a very Puritan school of architecture, and the approach has been fairly modernistic approach in architecture. So 6 years of that, including my stint in Zurich for a year, I went through some rigorous Puritan architectural concepts and the way one thinks about it. Somehow I was not ever fitting into the constraints or what the curriculum was. And all throughout my 5 or 6 years at CEPT, every studio project was something that was not the standard way of looking at things. And I don't think I've ever looked at architecture as architecture. I've looked at it as a culmination of various fields coming together. It's a very precarious position to be in as an architect. I don't come from a family of architects, and the first time I heard the word architecture was when I was in 11th, in school. I didn't even know what architecture was before that. So having had no precedence within this, my entire CEP journey was very, I think it was experimental. Every semester was very experimental. A lot of times it was successful, sometimes it bombed. But after CEPT, I did not join any architectural firm. We can talk about it in a later stage during this thing, but I joined an event industry. I worked there for 3 years, never worked under any architect. So it has always been something to experiment with. I've never seen architecture as just brick and concrete. I've always seen it as an environment that grows. It's not a standalone building, or it's not a building within a context. It's something that responds and talks to you all the time. I mean, it could be just a simple gate or a product or a furniture or a house or an entire building or a public plaza. Each of these spaces is something that responds to people around. And for me, it needs to continuously adapt itself and continuously respond. It cannot be a static piece that just sits in space and gets adorned for years. It has to keep changing. Even the design that we do, we leave it open-ended, so that over the years, everything changes within that and it adapts itself to the changing environment. Yeah, I think that's what it is. We never look at architecture as a piece of building sitting in a context. That is a starting point.
I think that's something that is very different from the kind of approach we generally hear from architects. They undergo a very different kind of training. They become a part of the firm, and that's what we've listened to. So the question is now, about the story of MOFA, because it didn't start as MOFA.
Yeah,
definitely. So I want to know, because many of them asked why this name was one of the questions. But for me, I think the question, I'm just going to reframe it and ask, how did this all begin? Where was the starting point? You had finished your 2002 onwards, you've been practicing, but 2007 is when MOFA came into the picture, probably got, a nicer form or a name and everything. So I really want to know the story of MOFA. That's something that I really want to know.
I think the journey starts much before, right after CEPT. And when I was not interested in joining an architectural firm, I had too much of architecture at CEPT itself, and I didn't want to join a firm that would lead me into the standard way of looking at things. And I was never wanting to look at that. In fact, I never wanted to even practice architecture after CEPT. I wanted to go into visual communication and probably join an ad agency or join a film studio to design sets. Fortunately, unfortunately, my first job was a laser animator, and I joined for about 3 to 6 months making 2D cell animations for an event company. The thing with me is I want to move on from one part to another part, and for me, architecture is a culmination of a lot of things. It's anthropology, it's sociology, it's art, science, technology, it's everything. It's not just architecture, and it has always been that way. Thankfully, the education system in CEPT has always been a lot of extracurriculars, a lot of electives. I was more interested in electives in CEPT rather than the mainstream studios. So right from music to filmmaking, there was a lot of exposure given to us, and all that culminated into not practicing architecture but doing something else which was far more dynamic as an environment. That's where 3 years of events happened. I did almost about 50 to 60 set designs or exhibition designs, which were very dynamic, which were non-permanent in nature. The entire design journey was very non-permanent. And from there, there was a thought that let's start an architectural practice, because one wanted to start creating something that contributes to the society at a larger level, stays for a longer period of time than just an overnight set or for a few hours, and something that was where I could see that design is being responded back and forth by the people who use it. It has always been a work in progress. The design approach has always been a work in progress to understand and see the responses of how people use the spaces that I design. Even if it was a set or a house or a building, it has always been, I'm always intrigued how people look at spaces. Anything that I put into space, whether it creates wonder, disgust, happiness, anger, what are those feelings? And those feelings are important to me, how people use that space and how they respond to it. So from there, it went on to another partnership firm, and some of the partnerships usually in architecture with my kind of thinking do not work because, it was more like, so I actually did not know how to run an architectural firm, to be very frank. And we learned over the period of time. So by the time 2007 came, I actually wanted to culminate all of those learnings into some sort of a formal practice. And the word fluid was always back of the head. And fluid is, I've been asked this question, I think 1,000 times by a lot of people. Does fluid mean form-based architecture that you do? No, it's not. I mean, fluid to me is a thought process that keeps changing. I was wanting to design an environment or a building or a space that is ever changing, that never is designed by one brain of an architect and left for years. It was the master's way of thinking. When Corbusier designed or Kahn designed or any of the masters designed, they left that and it became like a static piece of architecture. Today, you go to Chandigarh, you go to Villa Savoy, all of them are preserved architecture. I never wanted my building to become a preserved piece of architecture. I always wanted it to adapt or by the people. Let them change it. Let them look at it. To me, I think the best example of was Korea's Tara housing, where he started off with something and today it's something else. It's become a collage of things. To me, that is what was always architecture, a collage where everybody comes and pins up their memories, thoughts, ideas, and their way of living things. It's not one person's thinking. That's where the word fluid came in. And to take it as a very serious approach, the word manifestation was added to it. So manifestation of fluid architecture, or as MOFA, we know it, was formalized in 2007 with a very clear resolve that we are always going to be experimenting, adapting, and the design will never be 100% complete. It will always be left. There will be questions that will always be left for people or clues on which they can build upon. So this whole journey of leaving these clues for people to build upon is what the basis of MOFA is even today. Yeah, I guess that's what.
I think that's very, it has too much information in one question, but I think there's two things that I really think is really inspiring for me is, guys, you don't, many of the young firms who have written so many questions to us, I think you might not know where you start, but you will definitely find the way. And I really like the approach that your architecture was completely, a product or a consequence of all the different jobs that you had taken over. So that's very exciting to actually hear. And this is the first time I'm listening to a story where, someone who started off as a set designer came into starting off an architecture firm, and the kind of language that you put in, what you want architecture to be is very, very interesting and inspiring. But again, so the next question is about the MOFA, but I had one more. What is the semicolon in between MO, stand for? Is there a meaning to it? Because it's all very, very questionable as an interview. So I just wanted to know that two dots between MO, what does that mean?
It's an emphasis on M, or manifestation, that it's not just a frivolous thought. It's actually a manifesto. It's something that we seriously believe in. It's a reminder to us that this fluidity in thought should never ever be forgotten. No matter what the project is, where the firm is going, whatever be the project, we should never forget that it's a serious manifesto. So that's where the emphasis on M, and there is a pause after that you think, you ideate before you do anything, related to architecture or design.
Nice, very, very intriguing. So now the question is already leaked to you. So the question is, if you had to brand the works of MOFA, how would you do that? Or what would you brand yourself as? Because there are so many terminologies that comes into picture when you start talking fluid architecture. So if you had a brand, give a nice branding to you, or this is how I would like to be branded, the MOFA works, how would you want it to be branded as?
I don't think one would want to be branded if you want to be fluid. If you want to be always a sort of a cloud as an idea or a design, why would I be, or why would I want to be branded into anything? The closest that one can say as a word that comes to me is boldness. Our ideas are bold. We put it out there, and we put it out there for people to question, to criticize, to to question themselves and to question us. So I don't think we ever want ourselves to be branded into a category or to be put into a box. I think we all hate boxes, and we never want our ideas or design to be boxed into some sort of a cliche or a stereotype. So the idea of this branding just doesn't work. We are more like an ad agency. We are fluid. And I mean, we adapt ourselves. We are almost like a colorless water, and this cloud that just takes a different form every time a new project comes in. So if today we have designed more than 160 projects, each project has taken a form that is being defined by the need for that project, by the client, by the context, by the people who use it, and each one has its own characteristic. It does not belong to MOFA brand or any brand. It's just, it's water. It takes shape in the container that it has been. And that container also keeps changing for us all the time. So there is nothing static, and life is not static. Life is design, and design is life for us. It's as simple as that.
Nice. Very, very. I think you're the first architect who said that my firm is like an ad agency. That's a very interesting way to look at it. But now the next question that I'm going to be asking is, because you've always said boldness is how you want to define your firm. And this boldness always requires you to put your work out, in the public, push the boundaries, try to do something which, is required. I'm not going to be anymore calling you innovative or, you're pushing the boundaries, but I'm just naming it like this. Because when you make a bold statement, it means you're pushing the boundaries. You're doing one step ahead. So has pushing the boundaries ended up disastrously for you? Because risk is what limits me. I've just put the question as it came because there's someone out there who's asked me. I've always been scared of taking risks, including me as an architect and an academician. So has pushing these boundaries, being too bold, have you ever been too bold actually and ended up, having some disastrous impact or outcome out of it?
Most of the times. The stress level that one lives with, the adrenaline rush that one lives with on 24 hours, 365 days a year, and all these years of practice is never ending. I think we chose it. We chose to live that way. We're not risk averse. If we want an experimental lab and we want new ideas to be coming in, they are bound to fail. There are bound to be a lot of failures, and there have been a lot of failures. I think it will be kind of very hypocritical to say that you are all in all a successful firm. No, I think we've had more failures than successes. But from each failure, we've moved on and we've learned, and we keep adapting ourselves. Failures have helped us, and they have been disasters. If you want it to be so safe and I think risk averse about things, I don't know whether architecture is the right profession, because architecture makes you question every time. I mean, there are lots of professions. People ask me that, why do I even practice architecture? There's nothing been stable about this. 20 years of practice has not been a stable practice. It has given us nightmares at times. We have sweated ourselves, worried like hell. And, projects which have gone on to a level where we thought that it will be just built have been just stopped midway. Budgets have been pulled out. And some projects have gone disastrously long for no fault of ours. But that is something that you live with. And architecture is a journey. It's not something that you, I think if you're risk averse, then I don't know what to say. There is probably, this is not the right profession or something. Maybe there are safer professions to work with, a 9-to-5 profession where we could just kind of sit, enjoy life and enjoy the sunsets and, go on with, I'm sorry to use these words. And, but point is, I don't like to relax or to sit down or to kind of just, till today, I sleep for 4 to 5 hours a day. And I can't sleep more than that because it doesn't let me sleep. Architecture and design ideas and projects never let me sleep. So I'm always on the brink of newer ideas. I've woken up in the middle of the night at 3 o'clock and penned down my ideas or sketched something, because there's always something that's pushing you to do something different. Sometimes the ideas have come for even the projects that have not even existed, some newer ideas. So you just go along with the flow. And I think the firm, I don't think we would always ever be saying that, oh, now we are stable and now we have reached a point where we can stop taking risks. The day we stop taking risks, I think MOFA won't exist.
I think it's a very important statement to a lot of young architects who are looking. And I also feel that my personal agenda was that when you play too safe, I think then the point is lost. The emotions are lost. I think it becomes very mundane, and that has also led to the kind of architecture that our cities are currently facing. You want to play it safe. You don't want to risk it. You don't want to push it. But listening to this, I think really architecture has a different manifestation altogether. The M has a big emphasis, not just for fluid architecture. I think every kind of approach we take needs to have very important manifestations altogether. So now the next question is, I'm just going to be putting it on there. So now I have seen some of your works, not a lot of your works, but definitely some of your works. I've studied them, and I've always felt that, like you've already mentioned it, but I'm going to ask this as a question so that the people get a clearer answer of it. Why? The question was, why do you want all your works to stand out? That was how we got the question. Is it pressure? That I've already established a big name for MOFA, and if I don't innovate, what will happen if you don't innovate, or if I don't do real justice, or is it a pleasure? I know that the answer is the second one, the pleasure part of it, because that's how you've already mentioned, and it's all about the adrenaline. But I'm just going to ask it: why do you think every work of yours is standing out so boldly? Why do you think that either there are not, it's just like you're looking like the odd one out most of the time in most of your projects?
Yeah. No, I know where it's coming from, and I know there are a lot of times that we have questioned ourselves that you can't have every project taken as a risk or taken as something experimental. But then how do you decide that? How do you decide that between, you've got every project is like a kid. And do you decide to say that, oh, this one is only going to study till 4th class and this one is going to do masters and the other one is going to do PhD? It's not, you don't decide to do that. Every project is same for you. And every approach, approach for every project remains the same. Yes, we would like and we would love some projects to be very simple. They get over fast and we get money and our fees in time. But somehow it seems like an injustice. And even the projects which are really low budget projects, and we've been doing a lot of public buildings and institutions for government, where the budgets have been ridiculously low. But that doesn't mean that you can't, the whole idea of to be able to experiment and to be able to innovate a design language is when there are restrictions. So when we get a very low budget projects, we actually innovate even more because it's easier to do a project when there is open-ended budget. But when you have so many restrictions, you actually it makes you think more. It makes you want to experiment more. So there is no distinction from one to another. We don't set out that, okay, we want to be different from the rest of the projects that are happening. There's never an intent like that. So it is pleasure. Yes, there is immense amount of satisfaction and pleasure. All of us, I think, I can collectively say this for MOFA, that when we get back home and we look at ourselves in the mirror every morning, I think we are very happy and satisfied with what we do. There have been times where we have done competitions and not slept for more than 2 hours as an office for an entire 3 weeks. But that joy of working, we were working on a competition in Kashmir, and I think we didn't sleep for 3 weeks, and we were energized every day, even till the last day. We gave our submission. We hadn't slept for 2 nights continuously. We went out, I think, to a bar in CP after giving our submission, drank our hearts out, and then went back home and slept for next 24 hours. There is this rush that we work with all the time. I think that's what it is. It's the pleasure, bottom line. It's the kick. I hope I've answered that in the most non-controversial manner.
I think it's a very true statement, and there is no compromise on the kind of pleasure we get when there is pressure. But the next question is something that also came, especially from someone, again, a young architecture firm probably. I'm going to be sharing that question. I spend too much time on design, is what I feel, but rather not compensated enough. I'm just loading it. Should I segregate my time based on the money that I receive? Or how? So that's what I've got asked. So depending on the amount of money that a project comes in, should I segregate my time or should I give all into all the projects? Because the person who's asked the question feels that he's not compensated enough because he's spending too much time on one project.
Yeah. I think the impression that we give as a firm is that we don't, irrespective of the compensation that we get, we spend the same amount of time or man hours into a project. I think that's incorrect. When we talk about sustainability, and we all discuss sustainability at length, one of the most important things is a financial sustainability of the firm itself. I mean, there's a very simple statement when you are in an aircraft and there's an announcement that an air hostess makes that in case of low pressure, when you put the mask, before you put the mask to your kids, you put masks onto your own self. So if you are not able to survive as a firm, your projects are not going to survive. So financial sustainability is a very, very important factor. And over the years, we've learned effective ways, systems of how to make projects more sustainable. Even when I say that low budget projects and low fee projects, we spend and we innovate a lot, that's where technology has come in. And today we have automated so many processes over all these years that we are spending much lesser man hours, lesser number of people working on a project. From an average architectural firm in the country, the number of people that work in our firm are probably 1/4. And each person literally does a job of 4 to 5 people of an average architectural firm in the country. But that is where we've arrived. That's not how we started. We were a firm of good, 25, 30, 35 people. Today, cut that number down by almost 1/4. And we are doing more number of projects. In order to do that, we have automated a lot of our systems, our design systems. We've taught the machines how to work for us. We've done a lot of coding over all these years where we don't spend extra man hours without getting compensated for that much, so that we don't ever compromise on design. So I guess you have to come up with some way or the other if you want to still be innovative, if you still want to do good work. You have to find a way to be financially stable and sustainable as a firm. It's important.
But again, coming to the same line of thought, many young firms who are developing and coming up, find it really complex in order to handle this financial crisis, because I think the education system also does not include the handling of finances of business as a part of the academics, and I don't think it can also, because within the limitations of what we have. But there is this big doubt, how should I charge for a product? How much should I charge for a product? How do I really do it? Because there is a norm or there is not a norm and someone is getting it. So how do you think a young firm or a recent firm that's just starting up should charge for a project? And how do you handle, issues related to finance?
You need to know your value, bottom line. You need to kind of be able to understand where you stand. And a young firm, we didn't charge too much in the beginning. We couldn't, because obviously you want to do projects. And it's important to kind of have that journey. So you get limited resources to work with. Your fee is going to be less in the beginning. But how you last out those resources is extremely important. How does one charge? There is actually no thumb rule to it. We have tried all sorts of models. We don't work the developer way on a square foot basis. We don't work on we work on various models. There could be percentage, there could be square foot, there could be lump sum, there is man hours. Based on the kind of project that we are doing, we use that model. So there is always a last minute wisdom when we get a project and we're supposed to quote for it, to understand where this project and how this project is going to pan out. And we kind of built in that risk management within that whole thing and quote accordingly. Well, that is experience also. It has taken us years of experience to arrive at something like that today. We lost a lot of money in the beginning, but that happens to a lot of firms. I don't think there is any architect in this world who has said that they have been fairly compensated for every work that they have done. Even the biggest of firms, I think whether it was Zaha's firm or whether it was big all of them in the beginning went through a journey of almost getting bankrupt, almost shutting down, but they all survived. It's a will for us to survive every time. You want to survive, you will find a way for it. But that does not mean that you stop and taking risks. That does not mean that you, go the mundane way of going about doing things. It's going to be hard. I say to every youngster that first 5 to 10 years of every practice is hard. You always every day think whether you will survive or you will not survive, but it is the will to survive that will always make you survive. We always, I think, have that will. And when you have the end goal that yes, you want to run it as a practice and you don't want to kind of ever drown, you are going to find ways. Whether you eventually start charging appropriate amount, the compensation that the kind of work that you're doing, or optimize your resources within the firm itself. We've done both.
And let's say, giving a hypothetical example of a situation where there has been a project where you weren't compensated, and because I'm just getting more information into the way the firm works so that it can benefit a lot of other people as well. So there has been a situation where the compensation wasn't right and you really had to take a tough call about the project. So have you ever said no, or have you had to stop a project in between because the money factor did not work, or finances was one of the reasons you had to say no, or you have to come out of the project to break out?
No. Finance has never been the reason for either to say no to a project or to stop the project in between. I think finance has been the last thing. We have sometimes said no to projects where the fee was probably pretty good, but we didn't see a scope for us to do anything. Where the client had set ideas and he said, repeat this design for us, and I just want you to do a drawing and, just put it for us. I already have a plan. I already have this look. I already have this whole thing. Just put it as an architect for me, and that's it, and take your fee. We've said no to those projects because there's no joy in doing that. So,
but from a sensitive point of view, from when, let's say, a young architect is facing an issue like this, and also there's good money and there's less work, I understand that there is no joy and there is a little compromise, but why not? If I am a young firm and I'm really struggling to meet my ends, I'm just asking from that point, why not say yes to some things when there is good money involved?
Good question. In terms of, okay, I'll look at it this way. We have limited time, limited man hours. With the way we work, probably at one point in time, we handle, let's say, 20 to 25 projects. And if I have to add a pressure of 5 projects, which we just don't feel like working on because it's paying us money, it takes the interest away somehow. Money can be earned. There are other ways of earning money, sensible ways of earning money, than just to compromise in a project. If that was the intention, to make this firm into, a very rich financial kind of a thing, we would probably not do architecture. There are 10 other businesses that one can work and do things. But I don't think that has always ever been a focus. If that's not the focus, and the focus is to enjoy what you do, to have a certain kind of a job satisfaction, you take a middle path. You want to survive, you want to sustain economically, but at the same time, you don't want to make it so, we're not somebody who wants to buy a private jet or an island, as a firm. We would love to have it one day, but that's never been a focus.
Oh yeah, makes it's very honest, I should say. But I'm gonna just ask another. It's not a question. It's one of the comments that we got during this. Someone wanted to know why you had named yourself Bubblegum God on Instagram. I'm just trying to break the monotony here. Because I just thought we got a little too serious. So before I ask the next question, I thought I'll bring this in. So they wanted to know why. Is there a reason behind it, or is just something?
So I think the thought comes back to the point of fluid. When I wanted to start a firm after college, it was not an architectural firm. I wanted to start a firm that was an open-ended firm. And the name that came in was something like Bubblegum Designs. And something that you keep chewing and it expands. More you chew on it, more it expands. it's like the brain. So more ideas you think and further it expands. So it was more about naming it as bubblegum designs. But I think I was told by the peers and by everybody that time that it's going to bomb. You can't have an architectural firm that is called bubblegum design. Nobody's going to take you seriously. So that's when some serious names had come in the beginning, but it always remained at the back of the head. And somewhere it has to be used. So when the Instagram came in, I think it was just happened. It was not something that was intended.
No, I didn't really expect such an answer for that. I thought it was something more fun. But I think this is even more fun to know that there is a reason behind the Insta name. So Bubblegum Garden. This conversation is actually taking me to various levels of thought. And I'm thinking about a nice name for my Instagram as well. But let me think about it a little later. So I'm going to go on to the next question. I think that's a question that came, very, very subtly. I'm very sure that's from a student. Digital architecture is always referred to as expensive. I think his faculties have told this to him quite a few times. Do you think technology can lead the way in cost-effective construction?
There's a misnomer about digital architecture in this country. Okay, I have to think before I answer this question, and I want to answer it correctly. That there is a way architecture has been run for all these years, by a certain way the architects look at technology. And I say this to a lot of people, that India may be front runner in technology in other fields, but when it comes to architecture, we are really, really behind. And there are other countries which are far ahead of us, even the smaller countries. And the fault lies in the way we have ourselves looked at technology and architecture together. So a misnomer that what is digital architecture? Is it form? Is it the machines that one uses? I don't think it's anything to do with all of that. It's the way you think. It's the way you automate a process. Today, the way the construction industry is moving and the way it has become so expensive to construct, even for a normal person, cities have overgrown, construction quality has come down, it's environmentally unsustainable, large carbon footprints building RCC buildings in the middle of the city. Why would you not want to automate a process into something like a prefab architecture? And in order to do that, you need to start thinking how you start using machines, or how you automate it right from the beginning, from design to the production. We have started looking at architecture almost like a production process now, not as a construction process. The moment you start thinking kit of parts, a Lego coming together, it changes the game for you completely. I don't know whether I've been able to answer that at all.
But my question lies here: is this preconceived or this illusion of a notion about everyone asking a digital architecture or parametric architecture or whatever they call it? Well, is it really expensive? The buildings that you do, are they more expensive than conventional?
No, they're not. They're not. In fact, the Goa project that we are doing is a standard government project with the same budgets that any government building would have. So we've used machines.
The sports complex one.
National Institute of Water Sports.
Yeah, water sports. Yeah.
National Institute of Water Sports is. Sorry, would you just give me a minute? I'm just.
Yeah.
Client is just messaging in between. Sorry. Sorry.
No issues. Yeah.
Yeah. So National Institute of Water Sports is the same budget as any government project. We started off with a certain kind of it was a design competition. We had presented a design, and from there on, we had to start building it. And we looked at methods that would make that entire fabrication or a construction process fit into the government budgets. And that's where the entire research and development started. And for every project, there's enough R&D that goes in. It is done exactly within the same budgets as any other project would have been done. But we've had to innovate and think back all the time. When we had to do fabrication drawings, we did fabrication drawings for that entire roof in our own office. So we used a lot of coding programs to design flooring patterns, to do the fabrication drawings for their entire roof, so that the contractor would still do what he's doing in the same rates that he has quoted for. He doesn't have to do an extra mile. We went an extra mile in giving those drawings. There were more than 5,000 drawings created for National Institute of Water Sports. And out of 5,000 drawings, almost 60% of the drawings have been done by coding, by automation process. So we saved our time, we saved the contractor's time. And the moment you save time, the project becomes sustainable automatically.
So, but wasn't I think it looks very unreal to ask, because the projects look very dynamic. The projects feels look very dynamic, and
Yeah.
to bridge this is definitely because government, especially government projects, are the ones that are definitely at the moment, at least in the state of Tamil Nadu, has been looked at as things that there is no innovation at all in it. And so you're trying to tell me that it is possible to build the same way that you innovate. The boldness can be made within the conventional budget that we are
You
using
have to
in the
think
country.
like crazy. You have to come up with ideas that save the contractor's time and money. You have to think from everybody's perspective. You can't just think like an architect sitting in your own office and say it will get built. I have drawn these lines and it will get built. No, it will not get built like that. Bottom line.
So the idea,
you have to start thinking like a contractor.
so the statement that I'm taking out of this is that if there is enough work put into any project, we tend to say that any new idea can be built within a conventional methodology itself, and it is possible.
Yes, it is possible. You have to think innovatively. That's where the digital thinking is important. It is not a digital architecture. You have to start thinking like a computer, like a code. You have to kind of break it down in a series of parameters, that this is a parameter that you do. When we did the roof for National Institute of Water Sports, it is a simple color-coated galvanum sheet, which is the cheapest material available in the market. But how to turn them into CNC cut and CNC folded panels, we used a simple origamic method. We defined the parameters and the code which could automate those 6,000 panels into just machine cuts, folds, and puts it together. And it is done within the same budgets and the costs.
This is very, very intriguing for me as well to know that it is possible to build. Now, you had mentioned that in technology, in the field of technology, India has been very forefront, but in architecture, we haven't really pushed the limits in technology. Why do you think this is happening? Or where do you think is the gap in this? Because architecture is a field that is very important. It's also very essential for the entire country as well. But why haven't we really pushed the limits in terms of technology in this field? Why do you think,
I think architects are averse to technology. I would just put it that way. I mean, yes, I've had a lot of interactions with old-timer architects, and I'm sorry to say this, but I've always been pushed down saying that, technology is not something, the moment you start using technology, you're going to lose the feel of it, and you're going to lose the feel that you get using a pencil on a tracing paper. That whole romanticism about architecture that has been continuing from the 1960s does not leave the architecture colleges, the architects, and the students. It's the romanticism of that line drawn on a tracing paper. Oh, come on. I mean, the romanticism. Are we saying that a computer is not romantic enough? You can make the computer romantic enough. But it's just the way you look at it. If you look at computer as just a dead machine or a robot, it's a general human nature to continuously blame that machine as the most unromantic thing. So,
no, but I've heard the architects. Yeah, please go ahead.
So the moment you kind of get past that, you can't be averse to technology. And this is where the students have to start learning within the colleges that the skill of softwares, computers, technology is very important to pick up in those 5 years. You have to start building yourself in those foundation years.
Makes sense. Definitely. So I'm going to go on to the next question, which is, about an architecture firm and how it's being run. How important is marketing for an architecture firm? Do you think the current trend is very deceptive in nature? I think the hashtag goes to Instagram. The current trend is about Instagram and a lot of renders that's being put up on every page.
I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. If you don't market yourself, if you don't put it out there for people, how would they know what you're doing? So, I mean, today, earlier architects gave their projects in journals, in books, they got published. Why would you give out your work? Because you want people to see what you're doing. I mean, you want people to learn from there, you want people to know what you're working on. Today, the mediums are much easier. Anybody can upload from sitting on their phone a picture from a site, and there's nothing wrong in other people getting to know what you're doing. And I guess there's nothing wrong with marketing yourself.
And the kind of marketing, I mean, I wouldn't say exactly, the impact of social media. Because many firms, or many young firms that we look at, or recent firms, have a lot of renderings that is put up, but it lacks a lot of actual work that they have done, and they have not got an opportunity probably to do that. So what is your take on social media? I'm not going to be talking about marketing itself, but on social media and the kind of impact that it has. Because every student as well, when he looks at for inspiration or looks at the social media, is having a big role to play in the current education system and also in the practice. What do you have to say about social media?
People are going to learn and adapt. Today, it's being seen as an evil. When we were students, doing a 3D render itself was considered evil, or not using a wooden pencil was considered evil. It's one generation telling the other generation, because one generation is not adaptive to what that change is. Change is inevitable, and we have to know that change is inevitable. If yesterday it was moving on from a pencil to maybe using AutoCAD 3D or a computer itself, today it has moved on to social media. But people who want to innovate and people who want to do different things are going to look at inspiration and do something else from there. Are we saying that inspiration was not there earlier? People used to look at books and still get inspired. I mean, I know people who used to replicate exact plans done by Louis Kahn and Frank Lloyd Wright. So it has always been there. So what's wrong with looking at, yes, as a firm, we don't look into Pinterest and things like that, because those are just visual based stuff. And you tend to pick up a lot of diluted things from there. But if somebody wants to look at that, and maybe that is where one learns, ultimately you will move on from there if you want to do something different.
Now I'm going to go to the next one, because you made it very clear that the change is inevitable, and every time we come up with a new agenda, it keeps changing. So this is a question, again, I think it's from a young architecture firm, or probably an old firm. Pro bono work and unpaid work, should I do it or not?
Depends if you can afford it. It's not something that is a set rule. We do pro bono work.
Have you taken up? Yeah,
we do pro bono work. We do a lot of humanitarian or social work projects which are pro bono. But we also do other projects that bring money into the project. I mean, into the firm. We do private homes, we do residences that brings money to run the firm. If you can sustain economically, then why not? But it's not something that you set out to say whether I should or whether I shouldn't. There are projects that require pro bono. A lot of, I think, humanitarian works require pro bono because nobody has the fee to pay in those projects, but you still want to bring a change in the society. So, yeah.
So when you approach a pro bono work, when you take up a pro bono work as an office, what kind of work do you work on? Because that goes under
mainly public projects, maybe public infrastructure projects, like, designing a public toilet or designing, women relief centers. We did about 12 of them in UP, and there was no fee. We just did them because there was a social cause involved there, and we wanted to bring some difference out there. And we also wanted to learn that architecture is not just of one kind. When you deal with real-time issues with no resources, how do you come up with doing something like that? So it's a challenge that we put ourselves to.
Nice. So I'll go on to the next one, because I think we have a few more questions to go. Is architecture becoming an elite profession and a profession for the elite?
Architects have made it into an elite profession, I would say. It's not an elite profession. We want to look at it as an elite profession. Architecture is meant for people. It is meant for not for the architect themselves, but for the people they design for. So if you are sitting in your studio and wanting to design for somebody out there on the ground and don't want to be in touch with the reality, then automatically elitism comes in. Point is, how do architects view their architecture? It all starts from there. It is not an elitist profession. It's a people's profession. Yes, you are equipped to think better as a designer, as an architect, but it's not. You set it out as an elitist profession. No, otherwise it takes you away from the reality of what the context and the site and the situation and the project is.
No, definitely. But the see, I'm having a kind of a thought here. The role of education in all these thoughts, because the next generation, or the kind of students that come out, do you think education system or the kind of projects we focus on in the education system, or the kind of projects that generally is being taught, is all leading to this kind of an attitude amongst the students?
Yeah, there are unrealistic projects, a lot of them. One needs to look at real-time projects. I tell a lot of students who are doing thesis work, to pick up projects that are real-time, that are not something that are real-life problems, not an unrealistic project that, just you want to do it for your own fantasy. Nobody wants to take up a public toilet project. Nobody wants to pick up projects that are dirty. Nobody wants to dirty their hands. So I think we have made that into our education system that way, that certain projects are not to be looked at. Why? Let's be real about things.
Just out of curiosity, in your, okay, yeah, I understand, but since you sort of you've kickstarted so many thoughts today about fluid architecture. What was your thesis project in your college, in your set? Yes, it's a very curious question.
Yes, I had done. So I wanted to study the tribals of Bastar, and I wanted to do a project which was more of an interaction between the city scholars and the tribal life. So I designed a center which was in the middle of a forest in Bastar, where the tribal villages were, where the city scholars could go and spend their time like a gurukul for a year or a couple of years, understand the patterns. More of an anthropological project, okay, where you could kind of turn it into not as a study of a tribal, but to work together using their art and their sciences, and you contribute from here. So it was more like a bridging that gap between the two worlds.
Actually, frankly, I was thinking you would have definitely done a project in the Mars or in the moon or something very out of the box. That was my expectation. But again, see, I think it's very different, this kind of knowing side. But yeah, I think academics as an education system has a huge role to play. So I'm going to go on to the next question for lack of time. This is a question that we've asked almost all the firms that have come on board the future of architecture for reference and for understanding. What kind of economic impact did the pandemic have on your firm, and how did you overcome it? Because firms vary from owning their buildings to rental buildings to overheads to the kind of amounts they have to invest. So what kind of hit did you have, and how did you overcome it, or how are you calming it?
We went into hibernation, reducing this expenditure. Everybody has had an impact. We also had an impact, economic impact. But pandemic helped us to strengthen our tech side in the last 1.5 years. The limited projects that we were doing and some of the projects that kind of went on hold, we squeezed everything from there. It was literally a hibernation mode. We cut down the number of people, like a lot of firms did. And I think eventually we came up with systems that could help us do projects faster and get more projects. And today we've got new projects to work on, and the firm is back to its normal shape of what we were. So pandemic was a good reflection for us. It was an inner reflection that we had to kind of look at to kind of revamp our old systems, and it was needed. And thankfully we did that.
And were you able to accommodate? Because some of the architects that we speak to generally say that they had, been able to save when they run the office, and that money was helpful and stuff. So is it possible practically to run an office and be able to save money?
Run an office and save what, money?
Yeah.
No, never. With our kind of office, no. Impossible.
I'm going to go to the next one.
I don't think I even want to answer further than that in this. Even after 20 years, I don't think there's any. Yes, you build resources, you build assets. Yeah. We have a 3D printer, we have a lot of assets that we built on. But yeah, that's our saving, I guess.
And you've also set up an own space recently We were talking about it last time, and you had to do the entire space just before the pandemic. Your office setup was redone.
Yes.
Yeah.
We
So
made it
that's
into a more functional space now, and absolutely like a lab where we can
nice.
think freely.
Nice. So I'm going to go to the next one. Very straightforward. Architectural education. What is needed and what is to be avoided from a practice point of view, from your experience? What is needed in architectural education, and what do you think has to be avoided?
There is an oversimplification of problems that happen in design studios. And I have seen in a lot of design studios, 60% of the time spent in the name of research, where the kids are literally just, picking up stuff from the internet in the name of research, not really absorbing anything what there is. By the time the design starts, half the semester is gone. And there are sheets and sheets of research work. I think that approach needs to be relooked at. I'm not saying don't do the research, but the research is something that goes hand in hand along with design. It's not a separate entity. You think, you find out, you research while you're designing. The design concept is an extremely important factor, and design resolution is equally important factor. Equal amount of time needs to be given, and in order to achieve that, most of the students in most of the colleges do not have the skills of using the software. 90% of the colleges use BIM softwares, but I can tell you with a complete clarity, and I've had this experience with so many students, 90% of those students do not know how to use that BIM software. They use it to make 3D and do renders. BIM softwares are not meant for that. And no college is teaching that. No college tells them. The software companies come and sell the softwares to the college. And the colleges use those softwares, but nobody actually knows how to use it in the judicious manner. You don't use a BIM software to make a 3D render. There are other softwares for it. And then you use a software like SketchUp, which is just a ridiculous software, and I'm saying it openly. It's not meant for architects. It does not let you think. You cannot just push-pull all the time. I think the Puritans in SketchUp are going to question me and say that you don't know how to use SketchUp. Probably I don't know how to use SketchUp, and I don't even want to learn SketchUp. It is a restrictive thing. You need to learn, go beyond your comfort level in learning new skills. Paint, sculpt, plus use computers, both together. And learning of skills in these 5 years is extremely important, because in life, you are going to learn on the job, fine. But if you're not equipped, I mean, we lay emphasis of people who join us. It's important to learn certain softwares and to know them. People don't make across even the portfolio selection stage in our office when they don't know these skills. We hire very limited number of people, and we hire only the cream, people who know what they're looking for.
This lack of software or technical skills that you're talking about, probably BIM, but that becomes like, okay, what do you expect out of it? Let me put it that way. What do you think BIM should be used for then?
It's for documentation. It's for putting drawings together. It's to build a proper detailed model where you can systematically get drawings out and save time. People make 3Ds in a BIM software and then do the drawings on AutoCAD, which I just find it so ridiculous.
Now, do you use BIM in your office?
Yes, we do.
But for the right, so the point here is about learning the tool in its, to be able to help.
Yes, we don't use BIM for designing at all.
Yeah.
No,
I'm just curious, because most of the time, when we get portfolios, even as an institution, when students do portfolios, they have this bar, this big circle that happens. I know this software 75%, I know this software 85%, and then but when you question about it, the integrity of that software is never known. It's more like a game that has been installed on the phone, and that's very true. I'm definitely saying. So the question back to the question, you think that oversimplification of the design process, the time spent on research, should be in alignment with the time? So that is something that you think is needed. But what do you think should be avoided in architectural education in institutions?
I mean, it's very difficult to say to avoid anything, but to add more things is important.
Yeah.
I think one needs to add more things than to avoid anything.
Okay, so
things have to go hand in hand. I think the faculty needs to spend as much time as the students do, and the students need to be pushed further. I think it's not a very rigorous process when it comes down to it. in the real profession, we spend 8 to 10 hours in an office, and you work for 5 or 6 days in a week. Tell me which student actually puts that much of time on an everyday basis in a college?
Nobody.
So you answer the question yourself when you say something like that.
So which means so I'm just gonna bring it down to a point that many faculties also can listen and learn. So an architectural institution should also have the rigor to work like an architectural practice.
Absolutely.
That's what you're
from day one. From day one. I mean,
Yeah.
every subject is important to be learned. I'm not saying that. But if you've decided to become an architect and take up this practice as a rigorous practice, then you have to start from day one.
Yeah, makes sense. Looking at an institution as an architectural firm itself will change the way the amount of hours we put, the amount of decisions we make, everything will change. And I think we are going to be producing architects. We should first try to run the institution as an architectural practice as well. That is a very, very interesting point, and I'm definitely taking some notes out of it. So we have only 2 more questions to go as we've reached our time. The next question is, I think it's a very personal note. Kindly elaborate the process of design in your studio. The operations or how it goes. Where does the design start? Is there a process that you have in mind? Like we go stage after stage after stage, or is it very mixed?
We start with an intuitive process. We use a lot of intuitive tools to work on it. It's an open idea. There's a lot of discussions that happen, brainstorming that happens openly within the office. And from that intuitive model, or the intent model, as we call it, we go on to a design development stage where we start incorporating other factors into it: structure, services, the workability of the entire thing, finances, budgets. And from there on, we move on to the standard working drawing, construction stage, or the documentation stage of it. So there is a very clear process that we follow for every project that we do. And not that we don't look at changing decisions even when we try not to change decision during the documentation stage, but that doesn't happen. A lot of time, a new design idea does come in and you want to make a certain change, but that's exactly where, when we use, complementing platforms, we do a closed loop system. Our intuitive softwares to our documentation softwares are all linked together. So when we make a change in one, it makes a change in all. So we are continuously aware of every change that's going on every platform that we work on. So even in a fabrication stage, if there's a change that has happened because of an intuition, an intent model, it happens automatically. We have streamlined those systems now.
Have you been able to kind of bring the automation process to the construction as well, to the kind of documentation that happens inside? Because that's something that's been happening globally recently, how the construction and the design and the firm are. So have you been able to also?
We have started doing a lot of prefab. I mean, 90% of our architecture is prefab. And from there, we have definitely moved from fabrication, the design, fabrication drawings into automation and being built by the CNC machines and everything. So the houses that we're doing right now are being done by PEB companies, where straight away our fabrication drawings are going into the machine, building of those kit of parts and assembled on site.
So with the current trend of so much technology coming in, do you see a positive future for the the growth of technology in architecture in the country, or still do you think there is a lot of inhibition? Because many young firms, many people from MOFA itself have become alumni and they've started their own firms, and it's become a base. And many young firms, many senior firms are also adapting to technology. So how do you look at this trend? This notion, do you think it's going in the right way and we could reach definitively somewhere else in the near future? Nationally, the involvement of technology in architecture.
Yeah, I think it has to be taken at a big way. It has to start off literally as a revolution.
Do you think, are we on the right track? Or do you think we need to have more people, more involved?
We have to have a revolution of technology. We have not even scratched the surface yet. We have youngsters working on it, but we've not even scratched the surface.
So I'm going to be coming to the last question, which is a question that we generally finish up, with almost all the speakers that we've had. What are your expectations from young graduates and interns to join your firm? In detail.
We are looking for the right attitude. We're looking for the right rigor. And we're looking at skill management. You need to have skills. You can't say that I'm a good designer. Everybody's a good designer. what you have done in college is not enough. Are you prepared for the industry? And how well are you prepared for the industry? And how well do you have an attitude to adapt yourself to the rigor in the industry? That is the most important thing that we're looking at all the time. We are not looking at, somebody who's a topper in college or somebody who has gained marks and who's done the right checks and balances. We're looking at a right attitude. A lot of times we've hired people who have not been great students in the college, but have done brilliantly well in the profession. So it's always the attitude that matters.
Is there any specific set of skills or the softwares that make someone become a part? Because there are many students listening and they've written down. So I just want
I
them
think
to know.
if you follow the Instagram page, you will automatically know what softwares we're using. I usually don't talk about softwares in these kind of talks. So, I mean, there's enough information out there.
Yeah. Most definitely. So anyway, that's the last of the questions that we've had, and I have tried to not filter any questions because I think the conversation was very engaging for me as well, and it was very intuitive. And I hope the conversation and the interview was helpful for many students, faculties, and also academic professionals, practices that were listening to us. So thank you, Manish Gulati, for being with us today. It's a real pleasure, and I think this conversation is. I think we should have more such conversations and get to know each other better. So thanks a lot, and thanks a lot for being a support for all the questions, from the Insta name to the the rigorous and serious questions. So thanks a lot. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
I would definitely be happy if you can, whenever you're in Chennai, you can visit our Center for Design and Innovation, a small space we've created for us to ideate and innovate, and we definitely want to look forward and invest in the future.
Would love to.
Yeah.
For sure.
Thank you.